Welcome to Take Every Thought Captive, our digital space where we explore the Catholic intellectual tradition. I'm joined today by Dr. Benjamin Smith, our lecturer in philosophy, and Whit Smith, a Catholic. I'm Dr. Richard
Very good.
Bulzacchelli, a lecturer in theology for Catholic Studies Academy. Today we're going to be talking about current events in the church, the most current of which is the election of a new pope, Leo the XIV. So we just come off of a pretty short interregnum.
Hmm.
And I guess we want to just think about what might lie ahead. Right now, this figure is pretty unknown to most people, um, except maybe his family. But
Hmm.
for most of us out there who pay attention to things in the church, we really, we're sort of shooting in the dark. We're kind of
Hmm.
guessing about what might lie ahead. So, Dr. Smith, why don't you kind of get us started? What do you think?
Okay, well, I'll get started with just a couple of facts that we do know that have emerged, since, like you guys, I knew about the major, what I would consider the major probability, but didn't know about him uh, until I heard his name for the first time the day before he was elected, which was interesting in its own case. But basically, this guy, he was born in the 1950s in Chicago. Um, Wanted to be a priest from a young age. Joined the Augustinians, right, which is kind of cool. I don't know if we've ever had an Augustinian order pope. Maybe we have.
I
Um,
think we might have.
but he's an Augustinian, and he served as a missionary for many years to Peru. Before I think he was elected, or he was appointed missionary bishop in Peru. Then he was elected head of his order, I think, at a global level. And then he was moved over to the dicastery of bishops. Is that what it's called? Congregation or dicastery? One of the two.
Congregation, yeah.
Congregation, right. That's a very important position, actually. It's kind of one of those, it's like, it's not very, it doesn't have a high profile outside of the, like, you know, the curia itself, but it actually is important because he helps to coordinate the selection of new bishops. He also sometimes that congregation deals with problem bishops. Um,
Mm.
so uh, he served in that capacity, and I think he because of that, lots of people got to know him, right?
Hmm.
In that function, um, he has a reputation for being very personable, connecting well with people, not having temper tantrums, that sort of thing. Like he's a person of great discretion, is what people say, which I kind of like that. Um, so those are some of the things that is kind of out there if you're going to look up kind of the facts about him. Um, you know, my initial impression, I'll just be frank, was disappointment. Not so much because of him, but just because of, man, I really wanted, Sarah or Erdo, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe Pizza Pala. So, it was a little disappointment there, but, whatever. That, after that passed, starting to look at him, listen to him, gathering the facts, I would say, he is the Pope, rightfully elected. Everything I've seen so far uh, sounds good. You know, there are certain things that I like that he did just in terms of uh, like things he did, and then also things he said. I think
Mhm.
things he did that we would all sort of appreciate as he wore the traditional um, garb for
Mhm.
when he came out into the Logia. I think that's a big deal,
Right.
right? Um, so I appreciated that. He actually gave the blessing in Latin. I
Hmm.
appreciated that. Actually, his Latin is good and sounds natural, like
Yeah.
he's used it to speak it. So I was actually impressed with his Latin style, which says something good about him. I am pleased that he's known as a great administrator. I would say of our last three pontiffs, outside of theological questions, we could all probably agree that if there's an area they lacked, it's in administration.
I think not only can we all agree on that, they would also agree with that. I I think they just up and admitted it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
reason why they elected the the mathematician Pope. That's what he went
Yeah,
to Villanova and studied was mathematics.
right, right.
And I think there's a reason why.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. They want somebody that's going to be an even hand, a steady hand, right on the till. I think is the way they put it. Um, and for all of his image uh, for humility, it is also widely reported, by reliable sources that Pope Francis could be a pretty grumpy guy at
Uh-huh.
times and pretty wrathful. I was always shocked at several of his Christmas addresses to the cardinals, which were fairly ruthless. I mean, he kind of browbeat them publicly, um, in a way that neither Ratzinger nor GP2 ever did. Um, so I think he's going to have come with a different demeanor as well. So those are some things that jump out to me initially as helpful. I think his beginning words, peace be with you. Um, that was, kind of like maybe that's kind of what we're going for here, right? Is peace in the world, but also kind of some peace in the church.
I think his first homily was quite good.
Oh yes,
I think he struck the right notes, and it wasn't fire and brimstone. We talked the last time
yeah,
about fire and brimstone,
hmm
um, whether we needed that or not.
hmm
And I think I agree with you that there's a context in which it's appropriate. We didn't get that from him at his opening homily. That doesn't mean we'll never hear it under any circumstances. But maybe your opening homily isn't like the right time for that. But what we heard was that evangelization is good.
hmm
Evangelization is something that the church has to do. It's good for people to be evangelized, to become
Yes.
Catholic, to belong to the
hmm
church. That sin is bad, that darkness envelops the world, and we need to shed light. I mean, we heard those ideas in his first homily. So,
What struck me about that homily?
uh-huh.
I read it several times
Hmm.
and listened to it, and then read it several times. Read it out loud again recently to the boys, um, and it was sort of. It's going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but it's not really meant to. It was sort of boringly good, right? Like
Yes.
it was just Catholic. It was just clear and
Hmm.
Catholic. It was just
Yeah,
Catholic stuff.
he mentioned Jesus.
Yes, he said Jesus, right? And he really
Wow.
emphasized, like this proclamation that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and that He is the only way to see the face of the Father, right?
Yeah, and that there
Uh,
are rigorous moral requirements that are
yes, yeah.
due to us.
So, what's funny is that at least um, at least two of us here aren't like rad trads.
hmm
I'm
Um,
not.
okay. All right. So
Yeah.
three of us. We're not rat trads.
No. Though,
We
well,
have, but I think our audience knows that we kind of lean fairly hard in the conservative
yeah,
direction
look at your bookcase.
of the right,
Yeah, we all know this.
right. So we lean pretty hard in the conservative direction of things. I describe myself, I'll speak for myself. I describe myself as a JP2 B16 um Ressourcement aggiornamento guy. So for a lot of people that makes me a modernist. I don't agree with that assessment. Um,
A lot of online people.
I don't even know what you just said. I don't even know the Latin you were saying.
the
I don't think you're a modernist. I don't no.
um, but I would totally sign on to Dominus Jesus, right?
Right,
Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation.
right,
Um, any other nuances we might come up to about these, sort of abstract questions about what God does outside of the visible structures that he provides, that's pure hypothesis, but I'm not going to deny that Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation.
right.
And it seems to me it's just I used the term in a blog post once, or something like that. Something I wrote at one point that was up on the internet. Um, I use the phrase mere Catholic, right, in the way that similarly the way that C.S. Lewis uses the term mere Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically saying, we're just talking about people who believe the proclamation of the gospel, what the church, the constantly has constantly taught and believed, and
Mm-hmm.
the way we've prayed, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, and all the other sorts of disagreements that we have about style and schools of thought are comparatively superficial. As passionate as people may get about them, they're comparatively superficial. And we just want like Catholicism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you might want more, right? And kind of when I was thinking of, put it this way, that's a great floor, right? That's the
Yeah.
great middle, and that's the great, kind of center. Um, when I think about Erdo or when I think about Sarah, I was thinking about something more, right, than that. But
Hmm.
um, you know, uh, I would classify myself as something like uh, a non-trad reactionary Thomas. So go try to figure that out. But
I I think I have my head around that.
okay, anyways, I think that, but again, if what he's going to just give us, right, is solid, boringly solid, mere Catholicism that is correct with a little better liturgical reverence, right? A little bit of a nod towards small T tradition, um, in his demeanor and presentation and so forth. Hey, I'll take it.
I'll take it. Um, yeah. I mean, because I was thinking about what if Sarah became the Pope and he's like, why are you gay?
Right.
You no more, no more Novus Ordo. Like we're phasing it out in 1 year.
Right. Right.
Um, I mean, the church would hemorrhage. You thought
Yeah.
Vatican II was crazy.
Right. Right.
Like, I mean, you want the remnant, the B-16 remnant? It's try B-16 bomber, okay? Like you're getting a remnant of remnants, okay?
Right.
Well,
Right.
like the primitive Baptist, synod church down the street. That's what we're about. We would be to the modern church now as what like St. Paul, Saint was it the Saint Pius the Fifth,
That's right. Yeah.
society? Yeah, like the
Mm.
splinter off of the Saint Pius X. Give
Yeah.
me the mathematician. I don't even care if he wore a mask during COVID. I don't care if he, had if he argued with his aunt, his cousin on Facebook with Snopes.com about BLM or like whatever. I don't care about that. Give
Mm.
me a guy who is more right wing than most of the potential. And of course, it's funny now. Everyone's like, it's beyond the right and left wing. We know, but give me somebody on faith on morals who, for reference point for most people, is even more right wing than your MAGA whatever. Like abortion, no. Gay marriage, no. Transgenderism, weird, no. Uh, go to mass, yes. Just and preaching the gospel, preaching the good news that the world needs a savior, that Jesus Christ is the savior, and it doesn't have to be some like abstract foxhole prayer, string of prayers throughout your life. You can actually go somewhere where you get real grace.
Yeah.
I mean, it just fundamental. Just give me
Yeah.
fundamental. And when you're on an airplane, we know he's not going to be weird, like super vague. He's from Chicago. He's going to let you know what he's saying. I think we'll see. And like, I know this is like a speculative episode. I saw something on
Sure.
Twitter that was like, I'm reserving my judgment uh, until the first encyclical.
Sure.
And I think that that's actually is a fairly prudent way to go about it. Because his first, I read through the transcript of his homily, and it was like you said, it was solidly, boringly Catholic, but to us, that's like a breath of fresh air. It's
Absolutely.
like Gregory
Absolutely.
Wilton getting on MSNBC and calling Joe Biden a cafeteria Catholic. Like, oh
Right.
my gosh, it's like, ooh, you're like, we're dying down here. Like, help us out, like
Yeah.
be a little normal, any little
Just
normal thing.
yeah,
So,
and even some of the a little just sorry, Rich, but just some of the language in there. I said it was boringly Catholic, but some of the language he used was just kind of language that has been kind of retired over the last decade. Like he used
mhm,
the phrase "the mystical body of Christ."
Yeah.
He used the phrase in reference to Peter, Prince of the Apostles.
mhm,
Mm,
He called the church, the Ark.
yeah,
Making its way through the waves of history and a beacon illuminating and among the various nights of darkness. I mean, those are good old kind of images, you know.
yeah.
yeah. Well, think about it. How would you write if you just suddenly got elected Pope? You would
And you
like, when you're in an
and
argument, you
honestly,
get the
probably didn't
adrenaline
see it
shot.
coming.
Yeah, and you didn't see it coming. Say you get sucker punched. You're gonna be like, "Duh," it's if you get an assignment, you're gonna have an adrenaline rush. You saw him almost break down in tears while he was
Yeah,
blessing the whole
yeah,
world, which made me
yeah,
shed a tear, one tear. And then
yeah.
I listened to Freebird really loud. Uh, I mean, he is American. I don't care if he's like a Yank or whatever, a
Yeah,
Yankee. He's an American. He's ours. I listen to God Bless the USA, and you know, he is putting on his Pope hat, like
yes,
with
yeah.
his and good. Bring that out. Be at your best.
Yeah.
And I think that if he's going to be a mathematician about it and like show up and know that this is the biggest boy job potentially anyone in the world can have, then I
Hmm.
hope he continues this kind of rhetoric and teaching.
It is really kind of it is kind of interesting though, the a good sign. And I've heard a lot of people totally independently of each other note this, that when they were watching it, that he kind of gets choked up as he's giving the Urbi et Orbi blessing. I mean, just think about what it must hit you. You're the guy with
Hmm.
the you're the guy with the charism that makes him able to bless the entire world.
Right, yeah, yeah.
He
It's
brought the
awesome.
room of tears to the balcony.
Yes, it's
You
right.
know,
It's right. Yeah,
you're
yeah.
supposed to cry it out beforehand. He couldn't contain it.
There wasn't enough time. It was getting late.
But
I just
the other thing
I,
though is though again with his demeanor, he had that genuine emotion, but he also had
Uh,
the restraint not to blubber,
yeah,
which I think was actually correct. Like you can see his emotion, but I think maybe he has a sense of the dignity of the office,
mhm,
correct.
which I appreciate.
Yeah, you got to hold it together on their Ubi at Orbi. Okay.
Mhm.
uh-huh.
Orbi, whatever. Uh, yeah, I think you're right. I discern that this Pope, just from that image alone, um, I think he has he that moment for him, just discerning his face and how a moment of deep like gratitude, almost probably,
Mm.
and then probably a fairly scary like and healthy, scarily healthy fear of God.
Sure.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, you know, like this is the level at
Right.
which it's begun. So I'm, a lot of this is speculative. He, he could get in there and do whatever, but just I'm hopeful. I'm just hopeful,
Yeah.
Yeah.
honestly. And I didn't think I'd be this hopeful. I thought I'd be like, oh, okay, here we go, because I'm a pretty pessimistic guy. But man, after this, God rest his soul, after this Francis papacy and everything, I'm like, please, like, this is my life. Like
Right.
Yeah.
this
So
is
here's
my
the thing,
life.
right? Um, I'm not gonna stoke the flame right now about all the controversies swirling around
Hmm.
Francis and the various things that he said, and um, we're not gonna try him for heresy in this podcast. As much as there are people out there who want us to do that. Um, but here's what I can say, right? Uh, I don't think it's hard to imagine that anyone could deny what I'm about to say. He wasn't very clear. Like
Hmm.
when it came to teaching Catholic faith, just sort
Right.
of what does the church actually teach
Yeah.
on various essential fundamental points of faith and morals? There was more clarity at the beginning of his papacy than there was at the end of it,
Yeah.
by a substantial margin.
Yeah.
And and the result of this was, and this is how I'm talking about like the circumstances under which the current pope finds himself.
Yes.
Um, the result of this was a conclave that, in looking at it from a human point of view, I, it could have ended in schism.
Sure.
And this guy has got to realize that he's the person the Cardinals put their hopes in to prevent that outcome.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah. And I think that he just might be the man for the hour, and also that he may not only be sort of disposed towards that anyways, might be cognizant enough to appreciate that trust um, that's been invested in him. Let's hope that that's the case, and seems to be here at the beginning. Um, yeah, absolutely.
I think he understands the assignment.
Yeah,
I think Francis was at heart, a Jesuit, and I doubt Francis wanted to be the Pope. I doubt this guy wanted to be the Pope, really, in his heart of hearts. And I think Francis got in there and was like, okay,
well,
well,
here's the thing. I don't ever want to hear a pope ever. This is not even that big a deal, but to me, it was sort of like, I don't like this. I don't want to ever hear a pope say again, "Let's make a mess." Right?
Right.
no, dude.
Uh, yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
That's
Popes don't
contrary to
make a
the
mess.
office. That's
Right.
contrary to the office,
Right.
right?
It's
I
not to the
mean,
office. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, sheep make
You.
messes.
That's right. And you know what, who makes a mess, like you let your crazy Saint Francis. He can come out and make a mess, right?
Yeah,
Like those really, charismatic wild saints, right?
yeah,
um they're out, they're part of the church, and
yeah,
we
but
love
he
them,
wasn't the Pope.
but they weren't the Pope, right? Like even you take some, like a figure like Saint Rose of Lima, right? Besides being a woman, right? She's kind of wild, like,
besides being a woman.
like, you know, like, like,
In addition
she's,
to,
I mean, she's like putting, like, like walk around in public with, like, crown of thorns on her head and stuff.
oh yeah,
Like, I mean, it's good that that's part of the church, but that's a different kind of vocation, right? And different kind of charism, right? Than, the sure sign of unity, right?
right. Yeah, I
Yeah, the
heard
fool for
rumors.
Christ is not the person you elect to the papacy.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard rumors he did TLM by himself, and he knows
Yep.
Latin obviously fluently. Um, Again, I think that he understands the assignment. My this is anecdotal and anecdotal data set, but my I was on Twitter almost all day yesterday after this election.
Yeah, my condolences.
Well, man, I follow. I mean, I get a pretty wide swath cross section of the Catholic Twitter world, and
Hmm.
I only saw a handful accounts being like, this guy has a scandal, and like this guy, like really
Hmm.
deeply, like just publicly. 99% of the Catholic accounts I saw were stoked or
Hmm.
were like, this is fine.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
is okay. This is okay.
Right. 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 The even two things I want to mention that have been brought, sort of. And even I'm just saying this, I'm just recognizing myself, how in myself, with my sort of desire to like latch on with some hope here, right? Just how, beaten down and detached I was from the Pope, right? By the
Yeah.
time, at this point, I was just sort of like, okay, he's the Pope, and I'm gonna like, cover my father's nakedness and not mention it and move on, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Um, But like now that there's a guy who maybe is going to just be good, I'm like, oh yes, let's go.
I know. That's
But
what I'm saying.
I'm so excited. But the two things that people have brought against him that I kind of want to reply to. One is that Father James Martin was, excited about him being Pope, right?
Mhm.
And I do understand, like associations and who your friends are does give you
Mhm.
some insight here.
Yep.
But to say that they're friends is not exactly correct. Like they've met each other here and there, right?
Mhm.
They're high level Catholic actors. That doesn't mean like they're best buddies, right? And what
Right.
James Martin said about him was just actually fine. Like there was nothing like James Martin tweeted like he's a kind, compassionate person who speaks clearly to people and is friendly. I mean, it was just like, okay, good. Like it was nothing that like Martin didn't get on there and say, and yeah, he's really going to be pro sodomy, right? Like he
No.
didn't say that. What he said
W-
was just fine. Like I mean, you can dislike James Martin. I also recognize that not everything he says is absolutely is outrageously wrong or stupid, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Um, even one of the things about Martin that's kind of interesting to me. I listened. I can't believe I did to myself, but I listened to a full hour interview with him, and the guy who's do that Dow that the
Ross
Do
Douthat.
that. Yeah, Russ, do
yeah,
that.
yeah. So he did an hour long interview with him, right? And I listened to the whole thing. It actually was a fascinating conversation.
Mhm.
Um, it made me think like that Martin is right about those things that are controversial,
Right.
but like he kind of came across as like he's a big believer in Lords, right? And that's kind of cool, I guess. Like he didn't come across quite the way maybe. I'm not making any
Instagram
defense
puts
of
him
it.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but he's more than the Instagram image. Would probably be the thing, And you can make fun of
Well,
the way he
so was
talks, and
Francis.
right, and you can make fun of the way he talks, and that's fine,
Yeah.
up to a point. But, um, like one of the things he said in that interview that I thought was interesting is like he said the main thing, like his one of the things he said in there was he was like, I kind of didn't like the suppression of the traditional mass either. And he said, "Look, I'm a 1970." He was really funny the way he put it. He's like, "I'm a 1970s Catholic. I like those A-frame Catholic churches, right?"
That's funny.
he said, but um, it was self-aware, right, which is kind of interesting. But he said, but like I don't like the old mass being suppressed because it was important to a lot of people, and so
Right.
I thought that was kind of interesting, right, for
Who,
him
who is
to
that
say
you
that.
said?
This is James
Uh,
Martin.
James
James
Martin
Martin.
said that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
thought it was
interesting.
he thought it was heavy-handed, right?
Uh,
Now he said what he thought is, as long as he said there's a, you can take this too far, but there's a diversity of things that attract people. Just let
Mhm.
them all be there, and just don't say your particular thing is the only thing, right? Which there's a grain of wisdom to that, right? I think,
Sure.
or insight,
Yeah, I read his book. Gosh, what was it? There was a book he had out, and I read it, and 85, 80% of it was fine.
yeah, yeah. That was the one
10%
with
of it,
Saints.
yeah, yeah. No, I don't remember. It was the one on like gay stuff or whatever.
Oh, really? Okay.
80%, yeah, yeah. 80% of it was fine. 10% of it was like, huh, what do you mean? And then 10% of it was like, dude,
Yeah,
my
that's outright
gaydar's
wrong.
going crazy, man.
So the
You
other
know?
the other thing that's been brought against him, and this is maybe a little more serious, but I will see what you guys think about this. Is the role he played in the disciplining and then eventual removal of Strickland?
Mm.
yeah, I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts about that, Rich?
Okay, so my thoughts about that, um, are that there might be people who know more about what went on than I do.
Mm,
Okay. Because I don't know how much of this information is, the church's version of classified.
right.
But you know, from the outside looking in, the reality is that Pope Francis governed in a way that was pretty autocratic in reality.
Yeah.
Um, he may have asked for people's advice, but he often did not take it and just
It
did what
didn't
he
seem
did.
to always follow the normal procedures.
Yeah, he didn't always follow the normal procedures, and he often just shunted advice aside, even when it was given by extraordinarily well qualified and reputable people, right?
Mm,
Um, so that's a fact about the way he did things. The other thing is that the papal nuncio had more direct authority in the actual moves being made in with
mm,
respect to particular bishops in the U.S.
right.
than he did, and so what that leaves me with is just a giant question mark.
Yeah. So yeah, and there are things we probably won't ever
I think
know.
the evidence available to us, at least the
Mm,
evidence available to me, um, does not give me enough information to make a judgment about what he. I'm not trying to be apologist for him. I'm just
right.
saying the
Well,
reality is
yeah.
there's no evidence here.
So he did go and at the behest of the Pope. He did go. He being um,
Provost or
yeah, right. I guess you don't want to say Leo the XIV, but um, he did go and interview Strickland,
Hmm.
and was the guy kind of delivering the "you got to stop" or "there's going to be consequences"
Right.
message, right? And I think he was also. I'm sure about that. I'm less sure about the second one. I think he was the guy who actually then did go and said, "You're done," right? Like you're out. You know. Um,
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean he liked any of it.
that's right. And that's the thing I wanted to say is like, look,
Hmm.
the Catholic Church is a hierarchical church, right? I spent one brief period in a novitiate in a religious order when I was back in my young days discerning. And one of the things they had us read that actually has served me well the rest of my Catholic life was Thomas Aquinas on the religious vows, including the religious vow of obedience.
Hmm.
Now, this doesn't necessarily fall quite under that, but I guess it does, is not as a vow. But, anyways, regardless, obedience, right? If the Pope tells you, I want you to go deliver this message, and you are the relevant authority vis-a-vis being over the congregation for the bishops, well, you know, you might say, I'm not sure this is the best thing to do. He says, go do it anyways. Then you're going to say, yes, your holiness, and go and do it. I mean, unless he's telling you to do something that you know is a grave sin,
right.
right? You obey, right? Now, I think that that's perfectly understandable, right? That he would go and do what he probably saw as his duty, right? That doesn't mean, and this is what I was going to say about obedience. Obedience does not include necessarily agreement, right? It's just the doing of it, right?
Right.
So you can think, I don't think this is, warranted, or I think this is heavy-handed, or I think this is imprudent, or I think there's a better way, and maybe under the right context you express that to your superior. I even follow this in my own job within the church. But when the superior says, okay, I heard you, go do it anyways, you say yes sir, and you go and do it.
Right.
And so I kind of want to say, kind of back off on that point. He was fulfilling his role within the hierarchy. um, if you want to blame him from that, maybe blame the Pope or the nuncio. But I think at that point, he's just doing what he needs to do. The second thing I'll say, and this might get me a little bit of hot water, is I will admit when I say there's a fine line to it. But I think when you're a bishop, it's a little different than being a Yahoo on YouTube, right? Um, if you're a Yahoo on YouTube, you still need to exercise some discretion. But if you're a bishop, you should be savvy enough to kind of recognize, I'm approaching a line. I'm approaching a line. I have stepped over the line,
Hmm.
right? And if you willfully step over that line, you kind of get what comes to you a little bit. I think If you didn't want to be removed, there were other things Strickland could have done. I kind of I while I sympathize with some of Strickland's criticisms, I'm not sure that the bishop needs to be the one blowing the trumpet on those. I don't know. I tend
What
to
did he
favor a
say?
little bit of.
Didn't he say that like the Pope usurped the authority? Isn't that what got him out?
He
Something like
said some
that.
pretty strong things. I don't
I thought
remember
that
all
was
the
like the
details,
straw
but
that broke. Like he said the Pope usurped the papacy or something, and because like
yeah,
Benedict was out or something. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't recall that. I'm sure there's someone out there who knows every word that was spoken, but
right, right. But I
um
did get the impression that he's going down a path where if he keeps going down that path, that he's going to get removed. Um,
there was a
because it
thing
was.
that he did. There was a thing that he did that was sort of stepping on toes. Um I think it had to do with like he went to Los Angeles or something.
Mhm.
He led a
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
remember what that was? I don't remember
I
the
don't
details.
remember, but there was some sort of protest that he got involved in,
And
and maybe also. Mhm.
the issue from a canonical point of view is it was another bishop's territory,
Right, right, right. Yeah,
and you just can't really do that.
yeah. So I guess I just, and I actually know that even just again from my little bit of work, like when uh, one of the pastors I know, he when he gets into another pastor's parish, he
Hmm.
always gives that pastor, "Hey, a heads up, I'm in your parish. This is what I'm doing in your parish." Because the pastor in that regional area has some, authority.
Hmm.
right.
Um, I kind of thought Strickland was kind of a loose cannon, and I think loose cannons sometimes get removed. And at the end of the day, like maybe he had his points, but I wasn't a huge fan of the way he was conducting himself. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? I mean, I don't want this to turn into a Strickland bashing session either, because
Uh,
Strickland's a good man,
mm,
a good Catholic, a good pastor. Um, I think he was in many ways a very good bishop. The climate was just a perfect storm for putting people at odds with each other.
mm,
I mean, I just think this is part of what was just not right.
mm.
And if you know what I'm saying, right?
Sure, you're right about that. But I would always say, like, couldn't you just like been a great bishop in your own diocese?
Yeah,
Kind of
tone
just
it down
ignore.
a bit. I know.
Yeah,
I
just
get
tone it
it.
down a bit. Just do your thing in your diocese and make it a great diocese. And kind of just nod your head and look away, from these other things.
Yeah.
Um,
At the same time, I don't know. I mean, it is a final. Here's what Bishop Strickland did. That was why he got removed. Okay. So you know that uncle on Facebook who just he types in all caps and
yeah.
he'll post like Far Side comics about hating your wife and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That's the energy he had.
Uh,
And you know, and boomer to boomer or whatever, like he didn't like it. I mean, I think a bishop is, of course, you have to look at your ordo amoris and see, I don't know the Latin term for duty, but your orders of duties too, and look at, your immediate diocese. All right, I'm in charge of this flock and
Uh-huh.
addressing concerns with the churches and administering them. And then if there's any regional, pastoral concerns, we got to talk about that. And that's the primary focus. At the same time, you know, I know the church is very hierarchical, and the Pope's the top dog, but the Pope is first among equals. And there, I think that there has to be some, uh, that you have to be able to speak when so much seems like it's so fake and gay. Uh,
Sure.
just to be real. And
Do
so,
you
but
have
like, yeah, you're right. You have to have discretion. And I think, frankly, the Facebook uncle
right? Yeah.
route was not necessarily the best one.
Right.
And that, and I think he did at some point, or maybe that was Vigano who said usurp the paper, usurp the power.
Vigano definitely did.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's getting into a different category of criticism and critique. where you're like,
Right.
okay, now I'm actually attacking the Pope's legitimacy to his claim
Well,
and
Yeah,
like the
I mean,
and
Viganò just came out
publicly,
and called him an anti-pope, basically, right?
yeah, and
yeah,
publicly, that's the key, right? Like
Yeah.
right.
you
And
can
Strickland, yeah, yeah,
you
but
can
but
say some of
Strickland's
these things, but like when you
totally.
go all public, like it's one thing amongst your confreres to talk about this a little bit discreetly, you know, but another
And
to
that's
just
Vigano,
publicly,
but
yeah,
but Strickland, I think the world is so crazy, and the church at the end of the day and I look, this podcast is about the new pope,
yeah,
but the church historically has been just so woefully slow and underwhelming in the response to just the overwhelming crises both in the church and out. Yeah, like
Mhm.
I'm fine with bishops getting a little rowdier. You want to respect, it's kind of like um I mean, like the governors, man. If the governors are It's one thing for the governor of Maine to be like, I don't think Donald Trump is a good dude, and I'm a frumpy lesbian, and I and then she goes on in her Subaru to the national park on the weekend or whatever. It's another thing entirely to be like, I'm not enforcing the law, and men can still run in Maine high school sports and
Right.
women's sports and all that or whatever. Same thing. Um, maybe this new pope was a docile enforcer. Maybe not. I don't know. I know I have a feeling based on what I've read, or an opinion based on what I've read so far about this guy, this new pope, Pope Leo,
Mhm.
is that he is not he under I don't even remember I think his motto includes unity in it, his Latin
Mhm.
motto, and or something. He understands, I think he really does understand the assignment that if you keep riling up the trads,
Right.
you're gonna get, especially in America, and I'm so glad he's an American because he has American sensibilities. Um,
Yep.
and if you keep riling up the trads, or moreover, if you don't rein in to proportionately the Marxes of Germany and wherever,
Sure. Right. Right. Right.
you're going to have a wobbly church. And I know the church oscillates wildly through history, but somehow stays upright, which is the famous Chesterton quote. But
Yeah.
you're going to have a lopsided church, and that's
Yes.
different than one that's teetering. Okay, that's
Right.
different
Yeah.
than one that's. So I trust, or I hope rather, in the
Yeah.
technical sense of the term, that he understands that assignment.
I got you. I'm gonna step away for just a minute, gentlemen. Y'all continue.
What do you think
Yeah.
about that, Dr. Bulzacchelli?
I'm hoping that you're right about that. You don't have to make the trads an enemy.
Right.
Um, and the language that Francis used to address the trads was pretty judgmental. I mean, he called them judgmental, and that's judgmental.
Yeah, rigid and all that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Um, so, there was a significant contingent within the church and very observant Catholics at that, right, who felt, you know, disenfranchised and alienated under
Right.
Francis. And as you point out, you that's not really a sustainable environment, right? You can't, if you're talking about what the future of the church is going to look like, will there be any faith on earth when Christ returns? You can't drive everybody out. So, I don't know what to say. I'm hoping you're right that he's got kind of the sense that you have to make space for people.
Yeah. Well, and Strickland, Strickland was a rowdy guy, but like St. Paul was a rowdy guy.
Well, that's true.
You know,
That's
St.
another
Paul's
point.
rowdy. Like, how well would St. Paul fare coming in as a bishop now? With his temperament, even notwithstanding the historical.
Yeah.
I mean, just real for real, or like Saint Ignatius of Antioch, who Pope Leo cited
Yeah.
in his first homily, which I was very gladdened to see. Someone talking about Pope, or Saint Ignatius of Antioch,
Mhm.
who's
Hmm.
OG church father. Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay, he's church father literate. And I know he's a bureaucrat. The biggest criticism of the guy is that he's a vanilla bureaucrat or whatever. Okay. Um, well, it seems as though if he's willing to talk about Ignatius of Antioch and not, brother blessed, Stanley Rother or whatever, and like that's okay too if you want to talk about him, but like that's not his first guy to talk about.
Right.
It's Saint Ignatius. Like it seems to me that he's red-blooded enough. And that's why I said earlier, like, I'm very grateful he's American because I love America and I love Americans and we are the superpower of the world. And I think it's very, even if he's not like your MAGA Vigano, going to zooming from his house
Yeah.
arrest kind of thing. Even if even that compared to, unless you're talking about Africa,
Mm.
Oh yeah, in comparison to
that's
Europe,
it.
the
We're
US is
it. Yeah, like
a
he's gonna
much
come in. Yeah, he can't. He couldn't unless he's just he's gonna go off the rails. Just as a default guy from Chicago, I know he spent time in Peru and whatever. His sensibilities are going to be American, and that will be a corrective temperament for the global church, I think. And a lot of
so
people are saying he's a rebuff. He's a retort to Trump. Well, the guy
That's just
was registered.
speculation.
that's a
Well, he
that's a
was registered Republican. Okay,
Right,
yeah,
so
that's
right.
what they say. I don't know where anybody gets that information, but
they just want it to be true.
I mean, maybe it's true. I don't honestly, I don't know where people get that information. But then what do I know about finding out what people are registered as? The but the thing is
You can register as a those are public records. You can register as a Republican or Democrat through voter registration.
Right.
yeah, I just don't like know how people find that. But whatever. So um the we were talking a little bit about people, fathers from the past and their
Mm.
attitudes, their dispositions. And it is true, right, that you had some pretty outspoken, brazen people in the past,
Hmm.
that the church heralds as some of its greatest fathers,
Hmm.
right? Saint Athanasius of Alexandria. I mean, even the language with the language with which they discoursed was really inflammatory,
Hmm.
calling their interlocutors lunatics, right? That was pretty common back in the day.
The far left lunatics.
The raving, the ravings of the madman Nestorius, right? I mean, just
Yeah,
think about that kind of language that we find.
Yeah, but Athanasius wasn't Pope.
Yeah, so I mean, that would have been
that'd be a
somebody else
great
after.
book.
But
Inflammatory sayings of the popes.
Well, yeah,
but
Athanasius
he was
wasn't Pope though. But
so he wasn't the
here's
Pope. No, but I'm saying like when we talk about the bishops, how should bishops conduct themselves relative to the Pope?
yes,
Um, we had some pretty inflammatory people in the past, and I'm just saying,
sure.
the sensibilities of the age you live in, I guess, is what it comes down to. Back then, people just they didn't mind wild polemics. And they just that was okay. That was what people did. Today, we kind of want everything to be sort of calm and polite when we talk to each other as professionals. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just something that I don't really know what that means, but
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to really study that. I mean, one of the reasons that the Vatican, right, became so powerful in the Middle Ages, right,
mm,
was because it had an excellent bureaucracy. I know everybody hates bureaucrats now, but
uh,
actually try getting by without them, and it's a
Right.
lot worse. You actually do need to write things down. You have to have people who can read what is written down. You have to have processes that implement those laws and people who oversee those processes. And the church, from when every other institution had fallen apart in the Dark Ages, the church got a lot of its oomph from the fact it was still an operating institution, right? Um, and had laws, and those laws were interpreted and implemented sometimes unevenly, but still. Um, so it would be interesting to me. I mean, we can name outstanding charismatic figures in history, but I would bet that the norm is not insulting the like the pontiff publicly
Yeah. Well, most of the people I
a
was
lot.
mentioning didn't insult the Pope, but
That's right.
but I mean, they were brazen and outspoken, and
In other
they
ways, yeah,
made lots of
sure,
enemies.
yeah, and that's another thing to me. It's like again, I have a sense of your responsibility as a bishop is different than being Taylor Marshall, right?
Uh-huh.
Taylor Marshall has a little more. To me, I think Taylor Marshall has a little more freedom. Is there ever a case where a bishop can and should do those sorts of things? I think there, of course, that there can be circumstances that justify it, but I think they're rare. Uh, and even those need to be approached with some serious prudence,
Hmm.
right? And how you do that. Um, but in any case, I mean, I think one of the things about Leo here that I definitely liked, both of you references his reaching back, some to the fathers. I liked the old fashioned name, right? Like Leo the 14th.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Lots of people are speculating on why that's the case. Uh, the in the popular press and some in the Catholic press, it's because of Rerum Novarum, and he wants to be, stand up for the workers and the laborers. And if that's the case, that's great. I'm all for that. I love Rerum
Fine.
Novarum. I think it's awesome to stand up to capitalist oligarchs and call out greed where you see it, and call for true, correct understanding of social justice.
Right. And
Um,
also condemn socialism, communism.
mhm.
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's the
um,
thing is that document threaded the needle between those opposing
it did,
forces.
Right.
yeah. Um, but to me, sort of as an anti-liberal, right?
Hmm.
My reactionary part, right? Like to me, being against capitalism or critiquing capitalism is in fact anti-liberal, because I think capitalism is liberal. But that's an argument for another day.
Right.
The uh, I think the other thing that's also though present there maybe is kind of like an imitation of B16, right? B16 took Benedict XVI. I don't think anybody was betting on that, right? Like is his name, right? And
Right.
Benedict the 15th, an important pope, but kind of obscure in the 20th century. He doesn't stand out like, say, Pius the 10th or Pius the 12th, right?
Hmm.
But he just kind of got an old name, and I just like that. Like I just like, oh, I'm not going to be special here. I'm going to take a name from one of my predecessors. I think that's a
Right.
good that's a good instinct. I
It's a
like
good
that.
Hmm.
sign too.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what is it? Nomen est omen, est omen. Is that right? The name is the omen.
Hmm.
And
I like that.
if you're gonna have nominative determinism, um, my my name is Whit, and
That's what you do. The other thing though
yeah,
about all the references to Leo and Rerum Novarum is like, you guys know he also wrote Immortality Dei, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
that the temporal power must recognize the one true religion, which is the Roman Catholic Church, right? Like
uh-huh.
he also said that, right?
Right. And he also gave us Eterni Patris.
It's really fun. Yeah. So like, I don't think because he's not a student, I don't think he chose that name because he wants to do neo-scholasticism, unfortunately.
Probably not.
But
Probably not, but
nevertheless, yeah.
maybe he wants to bring back clarity.
Yes, that's right. There you go. Yeah, yeah. So I just I think the coverage of it was immediately and obviously stilted
Hmm.
towards just kind of one interpretation, when actually like I love Leo the 13th. I've never heard so many people speak well of him like in the public, but I think of Leo the 13th because of his anti-liberalism, right? Like when you
Well,
buy
yeah. And as you were
the
saying,
old when you buy the old tan book,
uh,
the anti-liberal encyclicals, right? Papal
yeah,
encyclicals, like he's like about a fifth of the book. you know?
Right.
if he was one of the most prolific popes,
Oh
actually.
yeah, yeah.
JP2, maybe bumped him, but he was really prolific.
Well, the difference is Leos though were a lot of them but short.
Yeah.
JP2 just
Yeah.
couldn't stop talking, man.
Oh, that dude would write 200-page encyclicals. But
Like, it's supposed to be a letter, man.
Yeah, I know.
It's not a
Uh,
miniature book.
right.
It's not a monogram,
I
but
finished your letter last week. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So, yeah, but the thing, as you were saying, to understand Rerum Novarum correctly, you have to understand it in the context of the anti-liberalist,
That's
concerns.
right. That's right. Yeah. 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 The Catholic Church, like Rerum Novarum, was um, innovative in a way because it explicitly addressed industrial capitalism and the conditions of working class within 19th century industrial capitalism and the political um, circumstances right around that. But the things that Leo drew on, right? I mean, I think he quotes Thomas like every third page, right? Like
Yeah, he liked Thomas a lot.
yeah, it's all like very true. Like Catholicism has never endorsed laissez-faire, right? Catholicism never
Right.
thought that you should be radically individualist, right? I mean, Catholicism has always been on the side of an economy that is humane and broadly speaking communitarian.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so the kind of the sort of economic strategy behind Rerum Novarum, it's distributism, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
which most, I mean, well, I don't know about most, but I would say numerous significant public Catholic intellectuals um, of the age promoted. I'm thinking
Sure.
of Hilaire
Yeah.
Belloc, G.K. Chesterton. Um, you know, the and what is that, right? It's the idea that given the fact that government cannot actually be truly neutral in economic matters, right? That it
Mm-hmm.
always has to tax and regulate and license to some degree in some way, right? It's got to do that. It's got to structure contract law and et cetera, et cetera. That there are ways to do that that favor the accumulation of productive property into the hands of families or
Yes.
disfavor the accumulation of productive property in the hands of family and
Yeah. It's really
instead,
yeah. That's
right?
a great yeah. It's a great note because really it Rerum Novarum right then is pushing towards right a wider distribution of productive property,
Right.
which conversely means a lesser concentration of productive property. Now, it never calls for outright equality, which it shouldn't,
Right.
um, but it
It just
is calling for more. And Quadragesima Anno, by Pius the 11th, picks that up really nicely and develops that right. Where he really calls out right the over concentration of capital in the hands of the few um, is a problem with respect to both economics but also social order.
yeah.
Um,
Whenever anyone's like, "What's distributism is just socialism," and I really a lot of distributist people I know have a kind of hard time defining it. It's just like on the elevator, you know.
sure.
Um, and I would say that distributism elevator sentence is basically um, capitalism without usury and ordered, most importantly, ordered towards the proper ends of the economy, which is the family unit.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
That's a good way of
I
putting it.
mean, that's
That's
it. I
nice.
Yeah.
mean, Tucker Carlson went on air the other day, like last year, a couple of years ago, and was like, I don't care as long as the family flourishes, like then that's it.
That's right. Yeah.
If there's anything that's discouraging that, I'm not in favor.
Right. Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah.
So you also have to recognize this is kind of an important thing to point out, right? Because whenever you get economists into the discussion, um, distributism is not an economic theory. It's a policy, right? You see
Right.
what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. It's not a theory about how it operates. It's a theory about what we're going to do.
Right, right,
It's not a theory. It's an agenda,
right,
right?
right,
About what we're going to do. Um, which if you're all laissez-faire, you're not going to like that, and that's just too bad. I mean, you have to pound dirt.
right.
That's just not Catholic. Sorry, like
it really isn't like
you know,
it's not. I mean, the So, Pope Leo, if you're listening, okay,
Doubtful, but
if you ever
I think he's
listen,
busy
okay,
right now.
if you go through your if you're doing your morning exercises and you're on the podcasts, because there's a high chance this guy's got his podcast app. Okay,
He has social media accounts, which is interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if Catholic Studies Academy factors in there and all. That'd be a
I
cool
know.
endorsement in case you want to throw us
That's
that's the
thumbs
clip you
up or
use for
something.
your socials. Pope
right. That's
Leo,
right.
listen to us. We
That's
like
right.
you so far. We're
Mhm.
praying for you earnestly, and let's get the family back in the center.